Want to turn your jade plant that looks like this into this? Well, I've got just the tips to help you do that, my plant friend, and the good news is that it's nothing too complicated. There are just a few things you might not know about this plant that'll help it grow into the sexy beast of your dreams in no time. Let's plow on. Now, this might shock you, so hold on to your hats, but the first thing you should do if you've got a little fella like this is this. That's right, chop it down. Chop it down to Chinatown. The last thing we want is for that long central stem to grow even longer. Long jade stems like this equals lankiness, and we really don't want that. We want this guy to branch out into all sorts of directions, and for that trunk at the base of the plant to get nice and girthy as this big boy. It might sound counterintuitive, but the more you cut a jade, the more it grows. Why? Because two branches always grow where you make the cut. Let's go back to the future and have a look at this little one before I lobbed his head off. We'll call this guy John. Right there on John, you can see the evidence of where I made a previous cut. As you can see, John has one stem coming out of the soil, which branches off into two. This isn't some unknown sorcery, my plant friend. No, this was human intervention. This is exactly where I cut John down last year. Now, for some reason, one stem became more dominant than the other, and I reckon that was down to the light he was receiving and will come back to light in a jiffy. It's very important. All this cutting malarkey is exactly why John's bigger, older, more handsome brother Paul is as bushy as he is. I never let his stems become lanky and new branches are popping off all over the place. To really hammer home the point, let me introduce you to George here. Just look how short and stumpy yet ultra bushy George is. That's because I've really been keeping on top of giving George a regular haircut, so he's developed a nice bushy mane. If you're worried about where to make the cut, then don't be. They really are one of the most forgiving plants. My advice is to punch fear in the face, get your snippers out and experiment. You can't go wrong. Look, there, I've no fear at all that I've killed John. Coming up, I'll talk about purple leaves, aerating, tickling and much more. But first, let me just point you in the direction of my free Plant Parents Troubleshooting Handbook that you can download by checking the link in the description or scanning the QR code here. It covers all the common nasties we experience as plant parents, why they happen and what to do about it, all in an easily digestible digital handbook, and it's completely for free. Check it out. So before I just killed John, we noticed that he had one stem stronger than the other, and my hunch was that it was to do with light. John has been living in Princess Sheffel's room for a year or so now, and I think he's been living in this position. One side is getting all the light, and the other is sat in the shade. And who's to blame for this? Princess Sheffield, of course. She's not been rotating her plants like a good girl. Anyway, light really is the greatest thing since sliced bread when it comes to plant growth. In the case of Jade, it's more the merrier. And to make sure one side doesn't become Andre the Giant and the other Brother Love, we need to rotate every once in a while. It's just a case of while you're checking if he needs a drink, give him a rotate 90 degrees or so. Simples. Now you might have noticed some purple colouring on the edges of your jade and wondered what the bejesus that is. Is it a sign your plant is on death's door? No, my plant friend. This is a sign that you are father or mother of the year and giving your little champ exactly what he needs. Son. This purple colour actually has a name, and for cyanins. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Forgive me if I'm not, I'm no scientist. This pigment is what makes blueberries blue, pomegranates red and purple broccoli purple. And give a jade the sun he craves, this pigment shows itself at the tips of the leaves. So it's nothing to worry about, it's natural. All of this is to say that jades want more sun than your average houseplant like a calathea or a spider plant. George lives in the sunniest spot I can provide on my west facing windowsill in my bedroom, and he's got the bushy mop to show me he's happy. John and Paul live on my east facing windowsill, so both get good morning sun. Now, I will temper all this by saying that I live in the Costa del Sheffield, which is a cloudy, rainy place at best. I've not tested jades in the searing heat of the Nevada desert, so I just can't say how well they'll get on a south-facing window there. But have a play wherever you are and see how they get on. I think it's worth training your dragon. If the leaves are fading and yellowing at an alarming rate, then you may need to transition to direct sun slower, or only expose him to the sun for half the day. Whatever you do though, don't Harry Potter him and force him to spend his days in a cupboard under the stairs. They're not low light plants. They might well survive in low light, but they won't thrive, and that's what we all want, right? Thriving plants to show off to all our friends, if we have any. If your home doesn't face the right way to get the best light for your jade, or space is at a premium, then a good bet would be to get a grow light on the go. Stick your Jade under a Sansi grow light for at least 12 hours a day and you'll have a jacked up WWF wrestler in no time. I use my 15% Sansi discount when buying the many grow lights in my home, and you can too by following the link in the description. I'll give you the lowdown on exactly how you should be watering your Jade in a bit, but one of the things you might have noticed with your guy or gal is that the soil they live in gets pretty hard, and this is down to watering habits. Jades are succulents and should be watered infrequently, with the soil drying out fully in between. This tends to mean that the soil becomes hydrophobic and solid as a rock. Have you ever poured water over the soil and watched in bemusement as it runs off the sides and barely penetrates the middle? This is what hydrophobic soil is. It's basically become so dry that it's repelling water. Crazy, but true. A way around this that not only helps it take on more water, but also increases oxygen around the roots and therefore boosts growth, is to aerate the soil. Stick with me here, quite literally in fact. Grab a stick, and I like to use chopsticks, and poke the soil a bunch of times to loosen everything up. Don't fret too much about stabbing roots and whatnot. They're more robust than we tend to give them credit for. All this lovely air that we're incorporating back into the soil would be like sending him away for a spa day. He'll come back all rejuvenated and ready to grow more limbs. So, watering, what's best practice? Every day? Every week? Every month? I've no idea. And not because I'm rubbish. Well, not only because I'm rubbish, but mainly because I don't know your plant and how long he takes to become thirsty. Basically, forget the schedules, my plant friend, and only water when the soil is dry. But don't wait too long. Jades are succulents, but I do find them to be a little thirstier than most other succulents and are more forgiving of watering a little too frequently. If the leaves are as shriveled and wrinkly as an Italian nonna sat in the sun, then you've waited too long. If they're mushy peas, then you're being too generous. Just stick your finger in the soil to see how dry it is. Wait for it to feel dry and then give him a thorough drink. And don't skimp here. Pour water over that soil multiple times. Drown that sucker. You can't give it too much. Overwatering is about frequency and not volume. That's the Sheffield Made Plants mantra. It's no use giving it a little dram and then going on your merry way. There's just no way all the soil and roots have been fully hydrated. To further bang the drum, I even do this to my Jades every single month. Well, I try anyway. Life gets busy, you know. All this water going everywhere and still no sign of overwatering problems for John, Paul and George. I really do need another Jade to complete the band. Anyway, why do I do this, I hear you wail? Because I'm lazy and this is the quickest way to clean them behind the ears. Those big leaves are dust magnets and we don't want our babies looking mucky, and they love to be clean and tidy to soak up those precious sun rays. So I talked about oxygen around roots a bit earlier, and you might have been wondering what the sausage I was talking about. Oxygen and roots are like sausages and mash, or something. The thing that will bring down your Jade quicker than a hot air balloon that has run out of gas is a lack of air caused by saturated soil. Saturated soil lacks oxygen, and when roots are sat in a murky puddle, they rot and die off. So we need to get two things right. Well, three things actually. First is watering, and I've already covered that. Second is making sure your guy lives in a pot with drainage holes so that excess water can easily escape, and third is making sure we use the right soil. The right soil is simply one that is chunkier than the chunkiest of monkeys. Normally it's got bits of bark, perlite and sand etc, so that water doesn't linger around too long like a fart in an elevator. Now I switched to pre-made mixes from Cybertanica last year and my plants have never been better. Look, they love me for it. And whenever I order a batch, I always save myself some pennies by using my 10% discount, and you can too by following the link in the description. So what of repotting then? When, how and why, right? To be honest, Jades don't need repotting super often. I normally repot when they start to look like a bodybuilder that hasn't been working on his legs. It's good to keep things in proportion, and I find it's a good rule of thumb to follow. Paul is looking a bit puny at the bottom, so I could do with upsizing him. Now that I think about it, it's been about 2 years since his last nappy change, so he is due. Now I don't normally mess around with the roots too much unless things are super tied up. I give him a little tickle here or there, mainly because it makes him giggle, and then plop him in his new home with nice fresh soil from Cybertanica. But here's the crucial part. I always water him after repotting. Always. Even if I only gave him a drink yesterday. It settles the soil around the roots and gets rid of the air pockets. This is super important for Jade health. Your plant won't die by giving a few extra drinks in quick succession. Trust me. You're probably sat there screaming at your phone, making a scene wherever you are, shrieking why I've not talked about fertiliser yet. I mean, we should fatten up our jades as much as possible to get them going, right? Not so much. Jades don't tend to be massive feeders. Sure, they like a lunch like everyone else, but it's not going to be the thing that explodes their growth. Light and root health are the keys to that particular kingdom. So I just give John, Paul and George houseplant focus like all my other plants, and that seems to work just fine. Now, if you followed my advice from the beginning of the video and hacked your jade to pieces, you'll now be left with a bunch of stems and leaves and whatnot. Don't hoover these up and lob them in the bin. You're destined to become a father for the umpteenth time with those bad boys, and not just with the stems either. Yeah, even those single leaves can be turned into Ringo, and it's a dead easy process. I cover it all in the video here, so check it out. See you next time.